Indian pilots are hurtling towards crash and burn. Earlier this month, 40-year-old Indigo captain Manoj Balasubramani had a sudden cardiac arrest just 55 minutes before operating a flight from Nagpur to Pune. Captain Balasubramani did not survive. Around the same time, a pilot of Indian origin died while taking a flight from Delhi to Doha as a passenger. He had once operated the first ever flight of SpiceJet. While Indigo has clarified that Subramaniam had adequate rest before he was to fly, his death has brought to the fore the issue long ignored in Indian aviation of pilot fatigue. To be sure, this isn't just an Indian problem. This month, a senior captain with LATAM died after collapsing in an aircraft toilet. He was flying 271 passengers from Miami to Chile. At least 5 other pilots operating flights for Southwest Airlines, Air Transat, EasyJet, Air Canada, and Eurowings have been incapacitated while flying this year. But in India, the noise around crew fatigue is now starting to get louder than it ever has, years later than it should have. On social media pages and community WhatsApp groups which ET has seen, there's an outpouring of complaints against employers who are sweating crew like they sweat acids, about more instances of night flying, often without much rest, something that ruins sleep cycles and alertness, depleting rest periods, AI and tech taking over pilot rostering that cuts away all kinds of critical human intervention that such planning needs. And above all, rules that are lagging global standards, that have been allegedly tweaked to suit airlines' commercial interests, and which can be easily tampered with because they are so rigid at a time when the world is moving to more flexible, scientific rostering of crew.
We're having a lot of deaths due to pilot fatigue is because all of this is adding up over months and years. 15 hours is minimum given by DGCA. The amount of time that you really get might not be more than 8 to 9 hours.
97% of pilots responded that the regulator in India is not doing enough to manage fatigue through regulations and or oversight.
First thing is, if there is anything which foregoes your good night sleep, it's not worthy.
So why are pilots dropping dead? Why aren't they reporting fatigue more often? Is it lack of awareness or greed for salary perks? What is with the airline's apathy towards their crew? And how urgently do regulations and processes around Indian airline crew need to be upgraded to treat pilots differently than the machines they are flying? All this and more in today's episode about a dangerous problem taking root in the Indian aviation industry. It's Tuesday, the 29th of August. I'm Anirban Chaudhary, and this is the Morning Brief.
Safety is a balance between production and protection. So if there is too much production, the protection goes down and accidents happen. There is too much protection, too much safety, then production goes down and the companies might go bankrupt. So the job of safety is to keep a balance between the two.
That's Amit Singh, pilot for over 3 decades. With Air India, Indigo, where he was chief of pilot training, Scoot, and Air Asia, where he was group head of flight safety. He also runs an NGO called Safety Matters Foundation.
In fatigue, there is a difference between being tired and being fatigued. Being tired is just if you have done some activity during the day and you are exhausted, one night of sleep and you recover from it. That is being tired. But fatigued is constant state of being tired and you're not able to think properly, foggy-headed, your reactions are slow, you're making more errors. That is the problem of fatigue and cumulative fatigue caused by sleep loss or accumulated sleep debt. Sleep is controlled by the circadian rhythm. So when you sleep, there is a period of circadian low, which starts between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning. That is when the body repairs itself Now, because of various reasons, be it commercial, economic, airlines have to operate flights during the day and night. So when we look at rosters, we have to look at the scientific basis of sleep. Now, if your circadian rhythm is disturbed because of flying at night or night shifts, then the quality of sleep is affected and you're not able to get adequate rest. You're not able to recover. For that, you need extended period of rest. As per research, the number of hours a pilot flies has been correlated with the number of accidents. And it has been seen that till you reach 10 hours of duty time, accident rate is close to 1.1. The moment you exceed 13 or more, it jumps to 5.5.
As it happens, airlines are doing all of what Captain Singh mentioned would lead to fatigue. Reason? Airlines like Indigo and Air India are on a breakneck expansion spree following a spurt in travel demand post-COVID. And they are faced with a shortage of experienced pilots or captains. At the current pace of expansion, India needs 1,700 pilots a year. Half of them would be captains, but it produces only 200 every year. Result? Overburden. For this episode, I went through screenshots of mails sent by pilots to their heads of operations and WhatsApp group chats of pilot communities. Most pointed towards faulty rostering, overflying, and lack of rest. One pilot in an email wrote about 25 hours of duty time as he missed a transit flight, was delayed, but had to wait at the airport without any accommodation given to him. Here's a captain flying for India's biggest airline, Indigo. We aren't naming him, and his voice has been morphed on request.
So basically, I've been in this airline industry in India for the past 8 to 10 years, and I've seen it firsthand. The number of flights that we do has increased dramatically. The number of flying hours that we are doing every month has increased as well. More importantly is the number of night flights that we do. Earlier, we used to do maybe like in a month, maybe 10% or 15% of flight through the night or in the nighttime. We used to get a good night's sleep and come to work. But because of the way the rosters have been planned and the way the flights are scheduled for us, we do all-night flights. And what has happened in the past 1 year is that these type of flights have become very recurrent. You keep doing them maybe 4 or 5 times a month. It has resulted in cumulative fatigue. So over a period of a month, if you do 2 or 3 of these flights, at the end of the month, you're really, really tired. I was looking at my logbook, the way I fly, over the past 3 years. So in a month, if I'm doing 60 hours, out of which maybe 15 hours, I would log in the night. But now if I'm doing like 70 hours, 35 to 40 hours are done during the night.
Okay, what is a really bad day now?
A bad day for an Indigo pilot, or I would say a tiring day, would start off at 3 or 4 in the morning. And for that, you have to get up at 2:30. So you start off from Chennai. I'll give you an example. You go to Bagdogra, which is 2.5 hours. From Bagdogra, you come back to Chennai, which is another 2.5 hours. Then you wait in Chennai, you go to Bangalore, and then you come back from Bangalore. So overall, you fly around 6 to 7 hours, and your duty is around 10 to 11 hours. So that is one day of the week. The way we are scheduled is that you'll do the same or a similar flight the next day, and a similar flight the day after that, and a similar flight the day after that. So consecutively, you'll be doing this on minimum rest for at least 4 days in a week, at least 4 to 5.
Pilots are also increasingly being made to operate 2 consecutive night flights without adequate rest, he said. The DGCA rule says that the airline can roster pilots thus. In fact, an airline can even roster pilots for more than 2 consecutive nights once a week.
So what has happened is that all the flights which go from India to the Middle East, most of the time are night flights. They pick up passengers at night and they drop them to all of these destinations at 4, 5, 3 in the morning. So earlier what used to happen was when you used to, let's say, do a flight from Mumbai to Jeddah or Mumbai to Dammam, you land at 2 or 3 in the night. You would have a layover. What has happened is that the airline is able to get us back without giving us sufficient rest. So layover times have reduced from 36, 40 hours to anywhere from 15 to 21, 22 hours, because you're able to operate the same flight that you took back the same day with just 15, 16, maybe 18 hours of layover. So that has increased pilot fatigue. It's also reduced the amount of time that we get in an international destination to rest.
Not just pilots, cabin crew are feeling it too. One big problem is how they are frequently kept on standby and made to fly at times that are outside their roster. So very often, a pilot or crew member will be called late at night and asked to fly because there is a flight scheduled, but it's falling short of crew. But are these cases mere exceptions, one-offs, a stray bad day or week for a handful of pilots? Not really. Captain Singh analyzed month-long flying rosters of 3 pilots. In the first case, he found more than half the flights the pilot was rostered for started at 6 a.m., which means he would have to go and report at 3 or 4 a.m. There were consecutive such flights, and some were to high-terrain destinations like Leh that require higher alertness. The second one made the pilot fly for an average of 10 to 11 hours consistently, with sometimes just a day's rest in between. What about the third roster?
So third roster will give you an idea of what fatigue exactly is. If I can sum it up, the person had night flight, then an early morning check-in, then a fatigue report, then another early morning, then 1 day off. So after the 1 day off, you have another night flight, whole night flight. Then you come back 1 day off, then a series of early morning departures. So this pattern continues. You have only one period of 2 days off wherein you can recover in the whole month.
So basically, this pilot got no rest.
Yeah.
I mean, and of course, my lay listener who works probably on the laptop overnight will have to appreciate that this is a completely different level of stress and strain when somebody is flying an aircraft. I mean, it's not comparable at all.
Right. And your maximum accidents happen during approach and landing. Now, if you have done consecutive nights, then fatigue sets in and there's something called micro sleep. Micro sleep is you go off to unintended. You don't announce that you're sleeping. The other pilot will not know that you're sleeping because your eyes will be open. And for a very few seconds, your brain shuts off. So that is the big risk at night flights associated with fatigue or coupled with fatigue.
What airline are these 3 rosters from?
So these are low cost. One is a full service and 2 are low costs. So low cost try to maximize and squeeze the maximum using different softwares and technology. Now you have artificial intelligence and other things available. And they have something called optimizers. So that system, the software produces these rosters. So it is basically not sensitive to the human needs and fatigue. It is basically right now looking at maximizing the commercial interests. The pilots are operating the machines, but after all, they are humans. So there has to be some interface which connects the softwares with the human factor part.
Got it. In 2020, Captain Singh's NGO conducted a safety survey of hundreds of pilots, most of whom cited safety concerns due to fatigue and a lack of empathy from their employers.
Subsequent to this, in 22, Safety Matters Foundation did a fatigue survey of over 542 pilots.
Mm-hmm.
The results showed that 54% of the pilots suffer from a severe excessive daytime sleepiness, while 41.4% self-assessed moderate daytime sleepiness.
Wow.
43% of the pilots have responded that they are fatigued for the next flight.
Okay.
And 71% respondents admitted that they often felt so tired that they should not have been on cockpit duty.
Okay.
54% pilots reported fatigue through fatigue management reporting system, and 69% pilots responded that airline is not training pilots or schedulers on the concept. The last but not the least, an overwhelming 97% of pilots responded that the regulator in India is not doing enough to manage fatigue through regulations and or oversight.
As Captain Singh said, none of the airlines are doing anything illegal, which means there must be a problem with the rules, right? For that, we have to understand how flight duty regulations across the world works. According to the UN body ICAO, there's broadly 2 ways in which a country regulates duty times for its airline pilots. One is the prescriptive method.
which is basically fixed time that you can fly so many hours with so many landings. A prescriptive is one size fits all. Every operator, no matter what kind of operation they're doing, small aircraft, big aircraft, if you are a scheduled airline, you will follow that.
So these are rules governing flight time, which is the time between an aircraft starting to move and coming to a halt. Flight duty, which is the time when a pilot reports to duty until 15 minutes after he's touched down his last flight. There are stipulated duty periods for a day, a week, a month, and a year. There are rest period limitations for shorter and longer flights, for night flights, and for international flights to different time zones. India uses the prescriptive method. Now, ICAO has said airlines across the world need to evolve beyond this approach. The prescriptive method, it says, represents a quote-unquote simplistic view of safety and a single defensive strategy. The ICAO has recommended a shift to something called the Fatigue Risk Management System, or FRMS. Why? Because while fatigue is something you cannot measure, you can do the next best thing. Use advanced scientific methods to minimize instances of it.
The FRMS typically looks at which airport are you operating, what time of the day are you operating, how's the weather around, are you operating during fog or monsoon, are you operating to a hilly region or some specific region where you have short runways or challenging runways. Then they analyze and determine that these are high-risk flights. These should not be four-sector or early morning departures. So these should typically be short sectors. So if you have operated a long flight before, then you should be pulled out for a standby for a short flight, not an extended flight. So you cannot combine the risk. You have to mitigate the risk.
India has been advised in the past to change its method to FRMS. In 2010, an Air India Express flight crashed in Mangalore. In the investigation, pilot fatigue was cited as one of the reasons for the mishap.
And it was recommended that FRMS be introduced. After that, there was a committee called Naseem Zaidi Committee, which was the only committee which comprehensively analyzed all the regulations in the world, the scientific basis of flight duty time limitations, and the current regulations. So they compared everything. They took feedback from the airlines, all the operators, and then they came up with certain regulations. But unfortunately, that particular FDTL could not be promulgated for various reasons.
So what was the problem? Was it airline lobbying?
Yeah, most likely it is the lobbying by the airlines and the regulator themselves. For whatever reason, it was all these measures were scuttled.
Why did the airlines lobby? Because a more flexible rostering may mean, number one, lesser utilization of their aircraft and crew, which may hit their margins. Number two, they may have to hire more pilots. Indeed, a report by a former DGCA senior official, A.K. Chopra, had recommended changes in rules that would require airlines to hire 30% more captains than the current rules make them. That was turned down by the government. In 2014, Captain Singh himself recommended FRMS to the DGCA.
While I was setting up AirAsia as the head of operations, and I had the assistance of Jason Hayter, who was currently the head of IOCC at Indigo. So we developed a fatigue risk management system, a manual. We got data from another airline with similar operations, which is permitted by ICAO. And we developed a FRMS, which is just like a safety management system. So this was in 2014. So that was submitted to DGCA. And in the first instance, they said, this is too futuristic. This will not happen in India. Eventually, it was shot down by the board, which convened to look at the FDTL. And they said, you go for the prescriptive one, which is given in the current civil aviation requirements.
I emailed queries to multiple airlines for this episode. Spokespersons at Air India, Indigo, and Akasa said that they have their own fatigue management systems. The spokesperson at Air India said it has engaged Boeing's Jeppesen rostering system. But many texts and mails I saw were actually complaints about Jeppesen. Air India also said that it has engaged the Boeing alertness module to guard against fatiguing rosters. Vistara referred to a biomathematical modeling solution to keep fatigue at a bare minimum. But none of the airlines answer the question on how they are engaging with pilots, creating awareness amongst them, and counseling those who are actually affected by fatigue. Also, it's not like the current rules don't call for spacing out flight times and giving adequate rest to pilots and crew, but they are just exploited and tinkered with by airlines. Here's a small example of how Indian norms fail to capture the many nuances that build into the pilot's working hours, which is gradually building towards cumulative fatigue.
DGCA mandates blood alcohol test before every flight, which is supposed to be 0.00%. But as per experiments, if you are awake for 17 hours or more, because of the sustained wakefulness, the cognitive psychomotor performance decreases to a level equivalent to a blood alcohol concentration of 0.5%. So your reaction time and the errors you make will be equivalent to a person who has had 0.05% alcohol in the blood. So on one hand, the regulator wants 0% alcohol, but this is an equivalent thing. You're behaving like as if you are
drunk
under the influence of 0.05%. Yeah. So this is the effect of loss of sleep.
And even with advanced processes like FRMS, fatigue has been a massive global problem. In 2011, an Air Canada pilot caused an airplane to plummet when he became disoriented after falling asleep and mistook planet Venus as the lights of another airplane on a collision course. The accident led to the injury of 14 passengers and 2 crew members. In a 2017 survey of more than 800 commercial airline pilots by the Pilots Union, the British Airline Pilots Association, 55% of respondents cited fatigue as the biggest threat to flight safety ahead of terrorism. A London School of Economics survey in 2016 found 51% of pilots in Europe reported fatigue. The pilot of a Fly Dubai flight which crashed into Russia in the same year was supposed to go on leave over fatigue issues. Earlier this month, pilots of Virgin Atlantic said they would go on strike over fatigue issues. Now, lack of awareness is a massive problem, as is fear of being sacked and greed for the additional salary that comes with overtime flying. In fact, in India, most pilots do not report fatigue.
First thing is, it's an ego issue for a pilot.
That's Kautilya Chaudhary, an aerospace medicine specialist. Dr. Chaudhary has been a squadron leader at the Indian Air Force and a training instructor at the One Aero Medical Training Center.
You should understand first Pilots are not like us actually. They're of different personality. So anybody and everybody cannot become a pilot. So their personality is different. So they don't acceptance of fatigue or reporting fatigue has to be inculcated as a cultural practice among aircrew population.
Pilots I spoke to for this episode said they aren't encouraged to report cases of fatigue. Air India does have a medical policy that triggers counseling sessions if a crew member reports fatigue more than once a month, or more than twice in 3 months, or more than 4 times in a year. So 1, experts say this is inadequate, and 2, most other airlines don't even have this. Instead, many crew members reporting fatigue are interrogated on why they reported and not why it happened to them. Mails flagging the issue are seldom replied to.
In Air Force, we have specific training curriculum for all the aircrew in aerospace medicine. That is, any aeromedical stressors or disorders, which fatigue is which of the one is the major component. They keep on getting training sessions, mandatory training sessions will be there. So I think that is lagging in civil aviation. I don't see anywhere there is a specific workshop conducted for aircrew to manage fatigue. Management of fatigue is 2 ways. One is organization is there, but self-discipline or how to monitor your daily routine to avoid fatigue, that system is not there. That is lagging what I actually feel in civil aviation.
Dr. Chaudhary points towards deep systemic flaws.
that if the aircrew gets a confidence that this whatever I report, it will have a positive impact, then they will report it.
And not just the DGCA, the airlines need to invest more in making their own flight duty structures more scientific. Here's what some US airlines do.
Some of the things works in different way. They take the consultants, private consultants or government agencies, everybody will be on board with a single goal of aerospace safety. So suppose if a research scholar designs a fatigue avoidance scheduling tool and he wants to keep it proprietary, and airlines will purchase from him. Services will be taken from both private, any of the agencies. They need not to have their own system. They can outsource always. See, when I'm here, when there is mental health program was designed, broad guidelines. So some of the airlines approached me. They wanted the whole program to be outsourced by me. Okay. So that kind of approach both scheduled and non-scheduled operators should have.
The Indian aviation story right now is of booming demand and massive growth. Airlines want to cash in on that story by spending less and earning more. By the end of the day, however, they need to realize that when it comes down to basics, aviation is nothing more or less than a form of transportation which is touted to be the fastest and, more importantly, the safest in the world. A fatigued, overworked, unfocused crew could change that in the matter of just a few serious flight accidents. And no one wants an undoing of that kind. You were listening to this episode of The Morning Brief. It was produced by Sumit Pandey, sound designed by Rajas Nayak. Executive producers Anupriya Nair, Arijit Burman and myself. We hope you liked this episode. Do share and subscribe if you did. Tell us in comments what subjects you'd want covered in The Morning Brief. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday on whichever listening platform you prefer. Thank you and have a nice rest of the week.